A couple of more Washington, DC police officers have committed suicide. Capitol Police, DC police officers committed suicide after, in the wake of the January 6th insurrection in the Capitol. I am muted, huh? Okay, in the Capitol. So as this has happened, we're not really sure the connections based off whether or not it was based off the committee hearings that have been happening, but there's been two more, as we saw that there was before. So straight from the Guardian reported about this. Washington D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department confirmed late Monday that another of its officers, Kyle DeFreytag, died by suicide earlier in July. That was just hours after declaring that the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department officer Gunther Hashida killed himself on July 29th. So on July 29th is the one that they've been talking about, but then just previous to that, earlier in July, which I don't think that story really got any legs, about this other officer that also committed suicide, Kyle DeFreytag. But this second one, the latest one, just on July 29th, came apparently after the committee hearing on accountability for January 6th occurred. So continuing on, DeFreytag, who was only 26, was deployed to protect the Capitol after police cleared the building of rioters and was involved in enforcing a curfew, is what the department said. Also, Officer Gunther Hashida, who was assigned to the emergency response team within the Special Operations Department, was found dead at home on July 29th. That's also what the department said. So in January, another police officer, Jeffrey Smith, these are the ones that previously had happened before, 12-year veteran of the force, and the Capitol Police officer, Howard Liebengood, the 16-year veteran, both also responded to the January 6th attack. They both died by suicide. So from the count, it's up to like 4, the latest being July 29th. And that was in the wake of, as we saw, some very powerful testimony from 4 officers from the Metropolitan Police Department and Capitol Police officers that were threatened, nearly killed, and attacked by this insurrection mob on the 6th. It's hard for me to come up with and I'm sure, maybe not, but this is what my assumption would have been. A lot of the thoughts and feelings behind this were based off of the negativity that many of these cops received. The pushback, calling them traitors, saying they deserve to die, and then hearing some of this testimony could have potentially triggered more cops that were dealing with the events of the day and maybe were within themselves, or maybe it's completely unrelated. That's the hard part. There's many people who maybe deal with these types of situations, mental health, depression, and everything, and they end up going this route, and it's always something that you wish you could have avoided. So I wonder to which case they're gonna look into this, or at least provide some kind of help for any other cops that had to deal with anything on that day, or are catching some of the post trauma that comes with dealing with the way people are treating and calling them names now. We saw it from the Laura Ingrams and the Tucker Carlsons of the world. So even without trying to connect it to these 4, or at least the latest 2 that have died, in what ways can we help the folks that are still with us? That's what I wonder is the next case we can do. Because I mean, if we point fingers, it's easy to do, but I wonder how much that will stick.
I'm not gonna lie, from the beginning, I thought the framing of this incident on January 6th was a little bit off, right? I don't know, I'm somebody who felt like they kind of sensationalized it, the politicians who were at the Capitol that day, as some sort of military, it's not military, excuse me, some type of coup, some type of insurrection, et cetera, et cetera. The fact of the matter is, there was no threat that the United States government would be overturned that day. In order to have an effective coup, you have to have the military on board. And we all know the military was not on board with this clown show, this freak show that happened on January 6th. And so instead of censoring the people who were actually at the front lines, meaning the police officers and the security, i.e. the everyday normal people who actually bore the brunt of this awful happening on January 6th. I thought it was a misstep to sort of be all very pie in the sky about the sanctity of democracy was disgraced, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, actually, man, the jobs of these everyday working people were made to be miserable and hellish. People are dying. There were people who died doing their jobs that day. People who got hit with spiked baseball bats. people who were basically terrorized at their jobs, man. And the effects of this, like this was a traumatic event for those people who were charged with defending that damn building, and these politicians, mind you, again, politicians who are of means, of privilege, who have access to power. Those people are straight. They're fine. Like, worst come to worst, these people can get private security. They can do all kinds of stuff for themselves. But the people who are on the front lines, the people like these officers who have died tragically from suicide, God only knows the amount of therapy that's gonna go into healing from this thing. Like, there were mobs of people with weapons storming their place of work, and it was their job to put their lives and bodies on the line. That is traumatic. You know, what happened to these people. And I'm sorry, they haven't been centered in the way that I think they should have been. Because a lot of times it's a bunch of politicians getting on TV, going on the Sunday show and being like, oh, I was scared, I had to flee for my life. Well, guess what? These people were actually fighting them on the freaking streets, right? And I think that we should have been centering the experiences of those people from this very start, specifically when you consider the folks who fan these flames on the GOP have historically claimed to be the most pro-cop people in the world. Damn near. And so, you know, we should have been centering these police officers and the horrible things that happened to them that day from the beginning. And I think we're gonna see the pivot to centering them rather than the politicians who had to, you know, pick up their laptops and run.
Well, I would just hope that maybe at least as these types of things happen, again, I don't, it's a little tough to directly take the pundits and the hate that comes from talkers on the air towards these guys killing themselves. And you could make that connection, but it's hard to definitively make that connection. But I would hope that at least it gives them some kind of a pause to at least go, well, maybe I had this to do with it. And centering these folks, as you're saying, I would hope wouldn't bring more of the disdain, because we know the names of the 4 officers that put their face and names out there. And yeah, they get a lot of positive response and support, and they get a lot of negative response and a lot of hate. And it's just those people that they don't have to put their names and faces to it. They can have a Twitter avy and then tweet out of their house, and it's just whatever it is, you know. And so that's the hard part. This is what we're pushing back against. And it's one of those things that I would hope that more of them can come out and have their names and stories be told without hatred being the response, and then hopefully without more violence or more depression and more suicides to follow.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.